So welcome everyone who's coming in. We'll wait about another minute or two for more people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you.
So as we're waiting for a few more people to join, I'd like to go ahead and welcome everyone to our TESOL Overview workshop. So I think today we have a lot of ETAs participating. We also might have some first-year ETFs possibly. And we also have some people from the ELTA program as well. So welcome everyone who's joining. I have a few just reminders at the beginning. Please make sure your microphone is on mute. To everyone, please make sure your microphone is on mute. We will have some opportunities for discussion later, and we'll ask some people to share later in the workshop. But for the first hour, we'll be doing some sharing, Deborah and I, and we'd love if everyone could have your microphone muted. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, one more quick reminder, if everyone can please mute your microphone, make sure your microphone is muted. So yeah, this is our TESOL overview. Welcome everyone. And today we have a lot of stuff to go over, a lot of information to share. So I hope that you don't feel it's too overwhelming or information overflow. We'll try and break everything down and give you all kind of a clear picture of what is TESOL and what it looks like in Taiwan. So I'll let Deborah get us started, or well, I'll start first, my introduction, and then switch over to Deborah. So my name is Deja Crystal. I'm one of the TEFL advisors who'll be working with the ETA program this year. I'm originally from Maine. I got my BA in East Asian Studies from Kalamazoo College in Michigan, and my master's in TESOL from National Jiao Tong University here in Taiwan. I'm actually an ETA program alumni from 2017 to 2019. I was in Kinmen and then in Taipei. And I've also had experience working with elementary school special education in the States and also university conversational English here in Taiwan. And personally, I love hiking, badminton, and I am a Family Mart coffee enthusiast. Deborah?
Thank you, Deja. Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Brimmer, and I am also one of the TEFL advisors here. I was born in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. You probably don't know where that is unless you're also from a military family. But I have a Bachelor of Arts in English writing, and my Master's of Education is in Teaching and Money. I'm TEFL certified, and my cognate area is in special education as well as differentiated money. I've experienced working in ESL both in the US as well as South Korea with elementary and middle school students, as well as adult learners. A little bit about me. I do really like The Office. I actually think it's funny. I like nature sometimes. I also like to hike with Asia, but I think dogs are bullies. I've changed my mind on that. But yes, welcome everybody. Let's move on.
Okay, so before we get started, we're actually want to do a quick icebreaker. There's a lot of people joining today's session, so we're going to do an icebreaker that hopefully everyone can participate in. If you can stop sharing your screen, Deborah, and our icebreaker is going to be, here, let me change so I can hopefully see more people, view gallery, so I can see everyone. I would love if you could turn on your camera so I can see all of your faces. We're going to do a icebreaker that you've probably done many times before. We're going to do a version of Never Have I Ever Taiwan edition. So if you're not familiar with the game, you need to hold up 5 fingers to the camera. And what we're going to do is we're going to say a few things that you might do in Taiwan or things you might know about Taiwan. And if it applies to you, you've done it or you know the answer, put a finger down. And if you lose all of your fingers, that means congratulations, you already know Taiwan. So wonderful. And if you still have fingers up at the end, hopefully we have giving you some ideas of things you can look into about Taiwan this year. So I'll go ahead and get us started. The first one is put a finger down if you watched Taiwan in the Olympics. Put a finger down if you've watched Taiwan in the Olympics. Great. The second one is put a finger down if you've tried bubble tea before. That should be, I think most people should have at least one finger down by now. The next one is put a finger down if you can name the tallest building in Taiwan. If you can name it, put a finger down. Anyone know the answer? Type in the chat or say it aloud. 101, yes. Very good, type in 101. The next one, number 4, is put a finger down if you have a friend who is from Taiwan. Ooh, some people have only one finger left. You might get out pretty soon, but we have 4 more. Deborah?
Okay, thank you, Deja. So put a finger down if you have tried sticky tofu. I never have, but I want to. It's on my list. Okay, got a few people who have. So put a finger down if you have ridden on a scooter before. Okay. Deja's already out of fingers. Good job. Okay, how about this? Put a finger down if you can name a Taiwanese dialect. And I'm curious if anybody can write in the chat any Taiwanese dialects. Anybody? Type it in the chat. I'm curious if anybody can. Oh, there you go.
Dialects.
Nice.
Dialects, not islands.
Oh, dialects, sorry.
Of
Yeah.
the languages that
I
are
see cities. So yeah, like, oh, there it is. I saw a few. Nice job. I saw Hakka. There you go. Nice job. Okay. So put a finger down if you know of or if you have a favorite Taiwanese pop star. Anybody? And can you name some in the chat? Because I think this is a great learning moment for us too. I see Airto. Did I say that correctly? Very nice. Does anybody know Lucy? I'm a really big fan of Lucy. Okay, very nice. Excellent job, everybody. Did anybody put all of their fingers down? Yes, Deja did for sure. Anybody else? Can you raise your hands if you put all of your fingers down? Oh, nice job. Oh, quite a few, okay. Nice. Well, thank you guys. Thanks so much for participating in this. It's nice to learn a little bit about you. Okay. So now we're going to move back into, okay, can everybody see this? Yes. Okay, thank you. So thank you so much, Deja, for starting that out for us. So now we're going to move back into TESOL overview, but first I would like to talk to you about our schedule for today's workshop. Okay, so our first hour here, we are going to take a look at what is TESOL. So this is going to be our general overview of the program. We're also going to talk about what does TESOL look like in Taiwan, and Deja's going to go in depth with you about a look at English in Taiwan. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to move into our short review, activity, time, and discussion. And then we're also going to wrap up with our discussion. Okay. So for this, I would like you to jot down some questions you might have during the presentation. We're going to do a wonderful Q&A at the end. So please, if you can, save your questions for then, and we're going to have some time to discuss those. Okay, moving on. So first, we're going to look at what is TESOL, or what is TESOL, as other people say it. So what does TESOL stand for? So TESOL is an acronym that you all might be aware of, teaching English to speakers of other languages, okay? And so TESOL is an umbrella term, and it is used for the teaching of English to anyone who does not speak English as their native language. So we're going to take a quick look at some other acronyms here. Okay, so English as a native language. This might be one that you guys are all aware of as well. So this is the language of the home and the community. It is a communicative and competence core form of schooling. So usually you have this in the home intensely and extensively before you actually get to school. So here I have an example for you. These students are from the US. They speak English at home and with their communities, with their family and friends, and they also use English at school and in their community. So now I want you to take a guess here. What is the meaning of this acronym? ESL. I have a few options for you, and I would like for you, if you can, to type in the chat, just A, B, or C quickly, what you think the answer is to ESL. Now, this might be easy for you. English as a source language, English as a second language, or English as a standard language. And I'm sure Deja right now can see what you guys are typing. Okay, let's eliminate one because I think it's pretty easy for you. Okay, and the answer, of course, is English as a second language. Fantastic. It seems like everybody got that one pretty easy. There you go. Happy dog dance for you. So let's look at an example here. English as a second language, which is usually when we talk about the TESOL field, people will just reference ESL. When we're talking about classes in native English-speaking countries where students are learning English as a second language to participate in schools and the community, this is the acronym you're going to hear mostly. The language of the community, but not the home. Access and wide exposure to English language, and it may be the main language used in the classroom. Okay, so again, this is a great example. Mina is from Japan, but she moved to England when she was 8. Okay, she speaks Japanese with her family and Japanese friends. However, she learns English and uses it at school and to communicate with members of her community. So again, this is one that you're going to hear often, ESL. Okay, let's take another guess here. What about this one, EFL? Again, if you could type in the chat, I'm going to give you a few options, and then we can kind of see if you guys know this one as easy as you knew the last one. English as a foreign language, English as a frame of language, or English as a Franca language. Which one do you guys think? Okay, I see the chat popping off. Very good. Let's eliminate one. And yeah, I think you guys got this one pretty easy. Excuse me, English as a foreign language. Very good. Let's look a little bit more in depth about ESL. Again, this might be one that you hear used interchangeably with ESL, but let's look a little bit more in depth of what it actually represents. Okay, so it's neither the language of the home nor the community. Students who you would describe as ESL or in ESL programs, they have more limited access to the English language. English is learned as a school subject, but not for communication. Okay, so they don't rely on English completely to need access to communicate in their communities or with their friends, etc. For example, Muhammad is from Libya. He speaks Arabic with the family and friends. He uses mostly Arabic at school, with the exception of 3 English classes per week in which he learns English. He also uses Arabic with members of his community. Okay. Let's take a look at another one. This is the last guess I'm going to have you take. What about this acronym? ELL. You might have also heard about this one. I'm going to give you 3 options and a few moments to kind of type in the chat what you think this one represents. A, B, or C, English limited learner, English linguistic language, or English language learner. Okay, they're just shaking her head yes. I think you guys got that one pretty easy. Very good, yes, English language learner. And this might be one you also hear said a lot, okay? It's what we reference our students as most of the time. Oh, these are English language learners. Whether we say, oh, this is the ESL field or the ESL field, we will use this acronym to reference our students. Okay, let's take a look a little bit more in depth as English language learners. Okay, this is a blanket term used for anyone learning English as an additional language. Okay, So it can apply to ESL or ESL students, like I said before. This is one you're going to hear most often. Okay, let's take a look at this example. This is Golden, who is from Taiwan. He speaks Taiwanese with his family. He speaks Mandarin at school, except for 3 classes per week in which he speaks English. He is an ELL learning in an ESL context. Okay, and Deja's going to go into a little bit more depth of what this looks like in Taiwan. Okay. Let's look at a few more acronyms here. I won't have you guess anymore, so don't worry about that. But how many of you guys have heard of this term? If you can just kind of like wave your hand. English as a lingua franca, okay? Usually you hear English referenced as the world language or a local language. And English is usually one of the multiple official language or de facto languages. Okay, it's used for communication between members of different native languages. Okay. So again, like I said, often referred to as like the world language or global language. Okay. For example, Yang is from Malaysia. She speaks Chinese with family and Chinese Malay friends. She uses Chinese, Malay, and English at school. She uses English to communicate with members of the community who do not speak Chinese. Okay. So again, the lingua franca of the world, right? So the common language we can use. Often people say, wherever you go around the globe, you can find somebody who speaks English. Okay. A few more acronyms for us here. This is ETA. This is what you guys are. There's some of you, English teaching assistants. Okay. So what you guys do is you're going to assist in elementary or junior high schools around Taiwan. You help support language usage, communicative competence, and confidence and cross-cultural awareness. Okay. So you're teaching the language, yes, but you're also helping the kids learn communication skills and also build their confidence in the language. Okay. This example, Audrey is from the US. She's living and participating in education and cultural exchange in New Taipei City. She assists in 2 elementary schools where she helps her students build confidence in communicating in English across cultures. And again, I think just to highlight, building confidence is so important. And Deja's going to go really in depth about why it is essential that you pay attention to and implement those elements as you teach. Okay. Before we go into this one, I do also want to mention we might have a few ELTAs with us. Are there any ELTAs? Just raise your hand. So our ELTA are English Language Teaching Assistants, and I do want to mention that is another acronym. We do not have it mentioned here, but they are also here participating in this presentation. Okay, so this one right here is what me and Deja are to you guys. TESOL advisors, or teachers of English as a foreign language advisors. Okay, what do? We are basically your support system here. We help you ETAs and your local teaching counterparts navigate the ESL and CLIL landscape in order to best support your students and opportunities for growth in English, competence, proficiency, and cross-cultural awareness and communication. So for us, we are, if we can be your lifeline, if we can be of any support to you through your process here, that's what we're here for. So don't be afraid to reach out. Okay, so the advisor roles, we give ETA and LET workshops like the one you're taking right now. We advise ETAs on teaching and professional matters. So each of us are assigned a group of advisees, and we each have a chance to observe ETAs and LETs in co-teaching at least one semester. And we also read and respond to ETA reports. So again, we're here to be your support system in any way we can help you guys through the process. So now let's take a look at English around the world. Okay, has anybody ever seen this model before? I'm curious. If you have, just kind of wave a hand. I'm curious if anybody has seen this model before. Okay, so this is actually Tatsu's concentric circles of English. Okay, so this model kind of describes and was promoted by Packer in 1985, and it describes the spread and usage of English language. And so he kind of stratified it into 3 different categories or 3 different circles. So your inner circle, which you could see right here, has USA and the UK. This is usually what we would consider as native English speaking countries. Okay, and from there, it's like where English is traditionally spoken, or traditional bases of English. So it's usually what we would refer to English being the mother tongue of that nation, even if there are other languages spoken there, just to clarify that. So it's dominated by the mother tongue in the inner circle. For example, USA, UK, also places like Australia and Ireland. Our outer circle, places like India and Nigeria. So this is where English has become institutionalized as an additional language. Okay, so it's not spoken natively, but it might be used to some important level for maybe business and commerce. Okay, and then our expanding circle right here, it includes the rest of the world where English is used as a primary foreign language. Okay, and so the next question really is, where does Taiwan fit here? And this is where you're going to learn a little bit more from Deja about where does Taiwan fit in Cacker's concentric circles of English. So keep that in mind. Okay, so why TESOL? You might be asking yourself this question. Other people might be asking you it as well. So I think it's just to kind of have an understanding of like, why do we do this? Why do we want to teach TESOL? Okay, so English is the dominant international language of the 21st century. Like I said, it's the lingua franca of the world, okay? It's a global language at this point. It's spoken at a useful level by some 1.7 billion people, quarter of the world's population. It is often the language of business, communication, science, information, and technology, and entertainment and diplomacy. So it's increasingly become the operating system for global conversation. Okay, and again, here is this circle. You can kind of see this spread of English usage and English influence as well. So when you kind of think about it, you're not forcing, you're bringing an addition to your students here, an additional tool in their belt as they might want to be participating members of the global sphere. Okay, so things you will teach. Okay, so cross-cultural communication. This is a big one. I often like to tell people, you know, you're not just here to teach English, you're also a cultural ambassador. You know, you didn't just bring in a textbook to Taiwan, you know, you're bringing you and your culture and your influence as well, okay? Also, communication skills. Like I said about the textbook, you're not teaching these kids kind of rote memorization out of the textbook. You're teaching them how to communicate and what communication styles look like. Cultural awareness. Like I said, you are a cultural ambassador in a sense. You're bringing your culture with you. As much as you're absorbing the culture in Taiwan, your students and the people in your school are learning from you. And then also literacy skills. Okay, so this is a great model to kind of look at the 4 domains of English language development. Okay, so we have it broken down into receptive language, and so that is going to be a lot of your heavy input, your listening and reading elements. And in order for your students to have heavy output, they need the heavy input. And your output is going to be your speaking and writing elements, and that is going to turn into your students' expressive language. Okay, how they're able to express themselves in language. Okay. So thank you everybody for listening to me about that quick overview. I hope it was concise enough. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Deja right now. She's going to give you a great in-depth look at what TESOL looks like in Taiwan.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Can everybody hear me clearly? Great. Okay, so thank you again, Deborah, for that kind of overview of what is TESOL and all of the many acronyms that we have that kind of fall into this TESOL umbrella, and especially when it comes to our roles and everything like that. That was a very clear kind of overview. So what I want to do is I want to go a little bit further into what exactly TEFL looks like in Taiwan. TEFL being teaching English as a foreign language, because as we're going to start off is pointing out that in Taiwan, English is taught in a foreign language context because, as Deborah mentioned, English is not the language that is spoken in the home or community here in Taiwan. It's a language that's spoken in English class in school. In the home and community are the other languages like Mandarin Chinese, Taiwanese, Hakka, other dialects, and so on. So in Taiwan, the students you're going to be working with are EFL learners, and we are your TEFL advisors, helping you work with this specific group of learners. So what I want to do is I want to start by giving you a little brief snapshot of Taiwanese history when it comes to English education in Taiwan. So where has Taiwan been and where is it going? So when I think about English education in Taiwan, I kind of break it into two main chunks, before 2018 and after 2018. And I'll explain why in one moment. So previously, when we first saw English being integrated into Taiwan's kind of standard curriculum, we first kind of saw it around the 1970s, where English became a part of the curriculum from junior high school. So thinking about the 1970s, who might have been in junior high school at the 1970s, that's the people you're going to be meeting in Taiwan who are maybe in their 40s, 50s, maybe that age group, if my math is good. I'm not a math teacher. So the kind of a little bit slightly kind of 40s to 60s, that generation might have gotten English from when they were in junior high school or senior high school in their standard curriculum. Now it stayed kind of in the curriculum starting from junior high school through the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And we saw it begin to enter the elementary school classrooms in the late 1990s. Oh, sorry. So in the late 1990s, around 1997 and 1998, we saw English begin to be integrated into 5th and 6th grade and then 3rd grade. And it officially became part of the national curriculum for all elementaries in schools in Taiwan to start English class from the 3rd grade in 2005. So what that means, if you look at this map, it means that the people that you are talking to who are maybe your age, people in their 20s right now, they probably have gotten English class from the 3rd grade. If you're curious about what is the kind of standard English level of the people you'll be meeting and communicating with in Taiwan, well, they probably received English classes from the 3rd grade. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have a high fluency or communicative competence in English, as you'll find as you go and interact with more people around Taiwan. One of the things the government noticed kind of after having implemented these classes from the 3rd grade is they noticed that even after getting out of school, we were seeing students and seeing young adults and adults who are kind of moving out of this curriculum, graduating out of this curriculum, having really good reading and listening skills, but not necessarily the best speaking and writing skills. And I'm going to talk about that more in a minute, but that kind of ties back to the curriculum that is very testing focused. And so as a result, a lot of the people that you're going to see today tend to be pretty good at listening or reading, but not necessarily as proficient at speaking and writing, simply because they don't get a lot of practice doing that outside of school, outside of an English class. Now, that was the current situation around 2018. That was the current situation. But then the government decided that one of the things that they wanted to set as their new goals or initiative was the bilingual by 2030 goal. This is a national level policy. This is this goal that they have to try and turn Taiwan or help Taiwan move towards becoming a bilingual nation by 2030. And so what this means is that all of those other kind of small problems they have with students maybe not being as good at communicating in English, they need to figure out a way to fix this to help the country move towards this goal. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing kind of the after effects of that in schools. So we're seeing Taiwan trying to move from this outer circle that Deborah explained into this, from this expanding circle into this outer circle, trying to have English become one of the languages that is used in Taiwan. One thing that I want to mention is that while Taiwan is doing this, while they're pushing this English curriculum with this 2030 bilingual goal, they're still doing so with a multilingualism mindset. I think that's a really important point to consider. In making this policy, in having all of these English programs being pushed, in having all of your programs expanding, the ETA program expanding, the ELTA program, in doing this, they're still going at it with a multilingualism mindset. And what that means is that they're not looking to replace Chinese or any of the local languages like Hakka or Taiwanese, but rather to add to Taiwanese people's language repertoire and prepare them and Taiwan to better engage with the global community, kind of going more towards that English as a lingua franca kind of idea as a world language that Deborah was mentioning before. So Taiwan's policy, their 2030 bilingual goal, is all kind of in an effort to help prepare Taiwanese students and the people of Taiwan to be able to better engage in this global community by adding some English on top and adding that into their repertoire. But how exactly are they doing this? Like from a policy level, starting big, what exactly is the government doing to reach this goal? Well, one of the things they're doing is expanding the English language programs in Taiwan, which is kind of one of the things that you are taking part of. Things like the ETA program, ETF program, ELTA program. They're working on expanding these programs to get more English resources into schools. They're also working on trying to update curriculums and putting more emphasis on expressive language versus receptive language. So one thing Deborah had mentioned was a lot of the times, she briefly mentioned the idea of receptive language being listening and reading, what students are already good at, and moving towards also including expressive language. So being able to use English to talk and write and present yourself and express yourself. So they're trying to update curriculums to include this type of language as well. They're also trying to provide funding for schools to be able to do this. There's a lot of funding that's kind of being pushed for schools that want to try bilingual programs. And some of you, as you had your school kind of presentations the other week, you might have heard some schools say, we have a bilingual program, we're a bilingual school. But what exactly is a bilingual program and what does that look like? I want to briefly explain that now too. So a bilingual program, kind of in just like a simple summary, would be a curriculum or course usually designed and proposed by an individual school, which would implement some type of content and language integrated learning program. Because to be honest, when we're talking about bilingual education, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. There's not one way to do bilingual programs. But one of the most popular ways to implement a bilingual program in Taiwan is using CLIL classes, or kind of integrating CLIL into these bilingual programs in schools. So for those of you who don't know, CLIL is Content and Language Integrated Learning. More acronyms for you, I'm sorry. And CLIL is pretty popular here in Taiwan specifically because it's pretty straightforward on paper. Content and language, one class, easy, right? Hint, it's not very easy, but we're figuring it out. But one of the main reasons why a lot of Taiwanese schools and different education programs have kind of grabbed on to CLIL and said, hey, this is a great thing we can use, is because it boosts English exposure outside of English class, which is key if we want students to develop more English fluency. If we want them to develop their proficiency, they can't only use English in their 3 English classes per week. They need to have opportunities to use English in more settings, in more classes. And if I have my 3 English classes per week with my textbook, but I also have 3 or 4 CLIL classes which use English and science, or English and math, or English and art, or English and PE. If I have these other classes in addition to my textbook classes, I'm getting even more exposure to English. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the big goal behind these bilingual programs or CLIL classes. It's all about increasing exposure with the idea that the more exposure we have to English, the more we're going to be able to kind of move towards this bilingual goal in simple terms. But now, how are we actually going to get schools to try out bilingual programs and CLIL classes? How do I go around Taiwan and convince schools, hey, you should try this? Well, That's done in part by incentives. So this all kind of comes from the central government, which has this big fund for bilingual education and this whole Bilingual 2030 initiative. They have this money for it because it's one of the policies that they're promoting. And so different county governments can choose to apply to the central government and get access to these funds with the promise that they'll distribute the money to individual schools in the county who are open to establishing a bilingual program. So if I'm a school in maybe rural New Taipei County, and I apply to my county government and I say, hey, I'd like to try a bilingual program, the government will say, oh, well, here's all this money because we have these resources for this right now. So it's a great way to get resources and funding into schools if they're open to trying bilingual programs. And also, it's a great way for schools to recruit students because a lot of parents are also interested in sending students to bilingual programs as well. So great, let's imagine that this all works well. And now we have a bunch of schools around Taiwan that have all this funding to start bilingual programs. Now what happens? Well, what we're seeing and what we're finding is that even though we have all this funding going to all of these different schools, no one really knows exactly what CLIL is, and everyone has a different idea for how to teach it. And so what that means is that these CLIL classes and these bilingual programs that we're seeing kind of popping up around Taiwan look different in every school. And there's a lack of uniformity in content and successfulness with these courses. Because ultimately, CLIL is still new. CLIL and bilingual courses, they're still new. And we're kind of learning together how to do them. And so that's just kind of a little bit of a context for you. So what does this mean for you in your school when you're going into your school to work? Well, what it means is that even though you're all in Taiwan, each of your experiences may look very different depending on how your school decides to utilize you. Some schools utilize the ETA, ETF, ELTA as a resource to use in their textbook English classes, because not all schools are doing bilingual. Some schools say, we'd like you to work with our textbook English classes and help students in this context. Other schools might ask you to help out with their CLIL classes or bilingual classes. Maybe some schools even have culture classes that are like a separate integrated course that they'd like you to help out with. Some might have English clubs. The point is that it might look different, and your schedule and the context you're in might look slightly different for everyone, even though you're in the same place. And this happens even within the same county. You could be in Taipei City and have two schools that are one MRT stop away from each other and have completely different contexts, because it's your school's decision for how they want to utilize you in their curriculum and schedule. But one thing to keep in mind is that our common goal is the same. No matter where you are, no matter what class you're in, the goal for you in this context is to connect with your students in schools and to kind of learn and grow together and have this kind of meaningful year and exchange. So there's a lot of things going around in Taiwan's English curriculum right now. I just threw a bunch of information at you. I don't expect you to remember all of it. There will be a small review activity later, but there will be no penalty if you don't remember everything that we just shared. But at the very least, I'd love if you could keep these three things in mind. The first one is to keep a positive mindset and don't get too caught up in comparing what's happening in different people's schools, because everything looks different in each school. The other thing is to remember the value and why we're doing this. And lastly, to rely on your support team. So let's break these three things down a little bit more. So when it comes to keeping a positive mindset and avoiding comparisons, this is just a general reminder to you, kind of like what I already mentioned. Everything is going to look different in different contexts. You might be doing a lot of different things. You might be doing something completely different from your roommates who you live with, who are in schools nearby as well. But I encourage you to go into each day into your school and just kind of do some positive affirmations. I'll do my best. I'll make the most of my experience, whatever I end up teaching. The second one is to kind of think back about our role and how it relates to the big picture. No matter what you're teaching, just by being in the classroom, you're bringing authentic language and culture to the classrooms. You're bringing yourself. No matter what class it is, you're still there, and you're still there as that resource for them, and you're having those connections with students. And interacting with them, that's a great way to help prepare students to engage in the global community. Just having meaningful interactions in the hallway, that's something that's really important. And if you are involved in CLIL classes, this is a great way to increase students' exposure to English outside of the English classroom. So if any of you are doing CLIL, you end up doing CLIL and you're worried about, oh, what English should I be using? What English should we be teaching? Because it's a whole new thing. We'll talk about that later. We'll have other workshops on how to do CLIL. But at the end of the day, one thing to remember is that CLIL classes are all about increasing exposure to English as kind of your main goal. So just being there, being yourself, having a positive mindset is kind of just where to start. And don't feel too nervous about all of the other stuff going on with Taiwan's English curriculum and all the big changes. Because at the end of the day, it's the connections you make with your students that are really going to matter in the long run. And lastly, rely on your support team. You aren't alone in this. This whole bilingual by 2030 goal is still relatively new. We're all learning together. And as your advisors, or two of the advisor team, Deborah and I and the rest of the team, we want to try our best to help you as best as we can, but we will need your help in keeping us up to date on your specific needs and questions. I said several times, every school is going to look different. If there's things that you need support in, make sure you let us know. Let us know what things you're struggling with, what things you need more resources for. Talk to us, and that way we can help structure our support to actually be beneficial to you. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper. This is, again, a lot of information. We have a 15-minute break coming soon, I promise, but a little bit deeper into a closer look at English in Taiwan. So this is kind of going into those English classes, into the actual classroom. What language are we actually going to be using? So more kind of even more specific, a peek into English textbooks in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, most of the standard English classes, if you're in an English class and it's just a textbook class, is going to be based around the English textbook. It's a very textbook heavy kind of teaching culture here. And other classes like CLIL, reading classes, interdisciplinary classes, teachers in those other classes will still follow a similar pattern of information delivery as the textbook English classes, even if there's not a textbook available. So it's a good thing to kind of have an idea of what kind of flow of information textbooks use. So just to break it down for you, most textbooks are broken into units, and each unit usually has some target vocabulary. In an elementary school textbook, that may be 5 to 8 words. Junior high school might have 15 to 30. Then it's usually followed by a short story or dialogue that uses those words, some target sentence patterns or a grammar focus, which is also kind of in that dialogue, usually some phonics or listening focus to practice sounds, and then maybe some extension with songs or culture or some other little blurb to kind of show students kind of to build on top of what they're learning in that unit. So this is kind of like some screenshots from a junior high school level textbook, or junior high, again, pointing out some of those things I just mentioned. Dialogue or story, something like this with some characters, some key vocab that they're learning, some sentence patterns, some fill in the blank, some grammar, these kind of things. So you're gonna get those kind of main elements within a textbook. And so building on that, because these textbook classes are so textbook heavy, this kind of builds into how assessment is done in Taiwan. So I'm sure if you grew up maybe in the US and you have more of a traditional American style assessment, there's a lot of different ways tests look. We have presentations, we have essays, sometimes we have like written tests. There's a lot of different ways to do exams. In Taiwan, assessments are pretty standardized, and assessments tend to be pulled directly from the textbook materials. This means that students can prepare for tests by memorizing the target vocab and sentence patterns. Very rarely are you going to see schools testing students speaking or writing composition like essays or short responses. And that's because those things are not necessarily practiced in the textbook. So the pros of knowing that assessment is usually pulled directly from the textbook is that students can know what to prepare and how to succeed on exams, which are an integral part of determining their future. High school exams, college entrance exams, and so on. It's really important here. It's important to know that. But the cons of this is that, again, kind of going back to what we talked about before, students kind of struggle to develop real communication skills because they're less able to use the language in real unscripted situations. All I'm practicing is memorizing vocab and these sentence patterns, and that makes my language very scripted. Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you? Fine. That's a very typical kind of interaction with Taiwanese students because that's what they're practicing and that's what they're used to. The reality of it is that we cannot change the testing culture right now. In one school, you're not going to be able to change the testing culture and this kind of thing that exists because it's tied into such a bigger picture. It's tied into the national high school exam. Like it's not something you can just change at your school because this comes from a national policy level. So we need to be respectful of its importance in the school culture here. And we need to think of ways that we can work with it rather than against it. And this is just kind of a screenshot for you of what that test might look like, that kind of grammar test, having students kind of rearrange the sentences that are already structured or so on. These kind of things are very, again, very like rote memorization. I read the textbook, I do the practice, then I'm able to succeed in this test. So what is missing from the curriculum? Here's kind of two kind of things that are missing. One is a lack of authentic language, like I just mentioned. A lot of the stuff, because it's very scripted, you're going to get some language that doesn't sound very, very natural. Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you? Or it's not my cup of tea. Different kinds of English idioms or things that are just built into this curriculum that doesn't always sound very natural or isn't very usable in a real like interaction with someone from maybe a different culture or a different country. The other thing, which I mentioned, is that these kind of exams and this kind of structure of the textbook does tend to focus more on receptive language, so reading and route memorization, so memorizing and then being able to do it. And what we see again is we get students who are better at these receptive language skills and not as strong at expressive language. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't do these things. They definitely can, but they tend to be stronger at receptive rather than expressive because of the way that this is designed. And these are, again, this is kind of a generalization, kind of a general kind of view of what is happening. This does not mean that this will be the exact situation in your school, but this is kind of like a general overview for you, just as some context. So both of these things, a lack of authentic language, focusing on receptive language, these are kind of counterproductive if Taiwan wants to achieve their bilingual by 2030 goal. Because if you want to be a bilingual, you actually need to be able to use the language. So you need authentic interaction with a language in order to develop fluency and communicative competence. So if we want to actually kind of help Taiwan move towards this outer circle, this is kind of where we come into this picture. This is where we can help. And how can we help? So this is kind of the last part. Break soon, I promise. This is, again, a lot of information. So how can you help with your role in schools? One of the things you can do is demonstrate authentic language. Another thing you can do is to bring opportunities for language interaction with students. You can also build students' confidence and motivation to learn. And you can also help exchanging culture as well. These are kind of 4 elements of your role, kind of similar to what Deborah was sharing earlier. And this is how you can help in this context within this bigger picture of Taiwanese English classrooms. But don't be scared. These seem like big goals and objectives to be trying to do every day, but it's actually, it's a lot of it's done on a much more micro level. So when it comes to demonstrating authentic language, that's just breaking away from that script. So teacher, how are you? Student, I'm fine, thank you. And you? Oh, I'm so hungry. Are you hungry? So just breaking away from those kind of more scripted interactions that they normally have is a way to demonstrate authentic language. And that's something you can do on a day-to-day basis. I don't want you to see these 4 kind of things and feel like it's these big things that have to be done on this big level. Even the smallest interactions really do help to achieve these goals. When it comes to bringing opportunities for language interaction, chatting in the hallway, chatting before the bell rings, maybe having an English corner at your school, joining students for lunch, joining extracurriculars, just being present, being there, being open to those interactions, providing space for those interactions, because sometimes students are shy. There's a new foreign teacher. I want to get to know you, but I'm scared because I don't necessarily have the English. And you being open or putting your foot forward first and kind of opening that space for it is a great way to start. Another one about exchanging culture. This is one of the ones that I think a lot of the times we get kind of caught up in the big picture of it all. But talking about exchanging culture is more about exchanging stories about how you grew up versus how they grew up, how things look different in your home versus how things might look in their home. It's about learning together rather than thinking about it as some big thing that I have to share or present on this big topic formally. So an interaction with a student like, oh, how do you get to school? I get to school by scooter. You drive a scooter? No, my mom. Oh, your mom drives you. In my home, we don't have scooters. I got to school by bus, a yellow school bus. Maybe I show a photo. Just something as small as that is really helping to make that connection and to exchange stories about your lives in a way that is accessible to them and can help with that exchange element. And lastly, building students' confidence and motivation to learn. This works just with encouraging them with a lot of praise, maybe using a reward system, and just being open and friendly and keeping the stakes low. A lot of the times when they're asked to speak in English, it's usually in front of the class, the teacher calls on them and asks them to say something, and there's a lot of anxiety there. And just by being open and kind of calm and welcoming, that's a great way to help increase their confidence and willingness to speak with you. Okay, so that's a lot of information again, and I know it probably feels like there's so much more to learn, and that's what these summer trainings are for. They're designed to help prepare you. As for ETAs, I'm not sure which ones ELTAs will be joining in as well, but you have some workshops coming up with the in-person ones on the 18th and 19th, approaches to teaching activities, classroom management, teaching, listening, and speaking, cross-cultural communication, and global teaching. We'll also talk about lesson planning and other classroom activities during the joint site orientation. And then throughout the semester, we have semester trainings from advisors, observations, weekly reports and reflector reports, and so on. So support is always available, and hopefully by the time you're in your school in September, you'll feel a little bit more prepared for this role. So last things to keep in mind, and then I promise it's a 15-minute break. Be optimistic and set realistic goals for yourself going into the school, just kind of going with an open mindset. I highly encourage you to observe first. So when you first get to school, listen, maybe observe. Sometimes you'll observe a week of classes before you actually start teaching, just to get a feel for the environment. What is the local teacher doing? How are the students reacting? What is their level? Tip, you can have an entire conversation with just body language. So if you're at school and you have a first grader come up to you and they're trying to talk to you and you don't speak Chinese and they don't speak English, it's possible to have conversations with just body language. So don't be too intimidated by any language barriers. Communicate with your co-teachers. Heads up, even if you do speak Chinese and maybe your co-teachers do speak English, language barriers are still there. That'll be something to overcome. Be resilient, thoughtful, and kind. And at the end of the day, students won't remember the materials you teach or the failures you may feel you have in class. What they will remember are all the fun they had with you as their teacher. So let's break. That was a lot. I'm going to stop sharing. Well, actually, I'll keep sharing my, I'll stop sharing my screen for now, just to see everyone. 15 minutes. So right now it's 2:23 on my computer. What is 15 minutes for that? Again, I'm not a math teacher. 39, yes, 39. Okay, great. Okay, so please come back here by 39. Please do not leave the meeting. Stay here. Do not leave the meeting because we'll be sorting you into some breakout rooms for an afternoon activity. So please stay here, but you can turn your microphones and cameras off and break, and we'll be back at 2:39. Yes. Thank you.
And to add, this group should be just Taipei, New Taipei, Penghu, and ELTA. Thank you.
That's a lot of confidence. A lot of confidence. I love it. Okay, all 60 answers in. A few more seconds, guys. Let's see. This one might be a little bit of a trick question. Let's see. Okay, we've got 41 people picked the correct answer. Nice. Reading and listening. 16 people picked reading and writing, and speaking, listening, writing, and speaking. But yes, the answer is reading and listening is more heavily focused on, so it tends to be, students tend to be better at that. Okay, Kelly is back in the game. Nice job, Kelly. Okay, last question, guys. In order to achieve the bilingual by 2030 goals, schools are encouraged to teach CLIL classes. What does CLIL stand for? I saved the hardest question for last. Let's see, you guys are answering quick again, so I don't know if it looks difficult for you. Okay, class and language interesting learning, core language and integrated learning, content and language interesting learning, or content and language integrated learning. Let's see, a few more seconds. Some people are taking their time to think about it. That's nice. Hey, yes. Okay, nice job, guys. 43 of you picked the correct answer. Content and language integrated learning. And no pressure for anybody who picked anything else. This is something we are going to learn about at length as you move through the program. Nice job. Okay, let's see. Who's on our podium? Okay. Presley. Round of applause. Third place. Second place, Jasmine. And top of the podium is Grace. All right, Grace. Way to get it. Nice job, guys. Thank you so much for participating in this. And we also have some runner-ups at the bottom, but I hope you guys enjoyed this review. And I'm going to pass it back over to Deja.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. 1 second. Share. Okay, so can you all see my screen? Yes, presumably yes. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So thank you for the review, Deborah. And let me see, because I can't see any of your faces, so I can't actually see if you're saying anything. Please just, if you can't hear me or you can't see my screen, just turn on your mic and let me know. So now that we have had this whole first full hour and this review, hopefully you have some kind of general understanding of what TESOL is, what TESOL or TEFL looks like in Taiwan, and what your role kind of might be in the classroom, what some of your goals are working in this context. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take an even closer look at the actual language, the actual English language. We're going to take a quick look at the national standards and how they can help inform our teaching and activity design. But a big but here, I want to do a little bit of a disclaimer before we jump into this second activity. Please don't be overwhelmed. So I don't know how many of you have experience in, here, let me see, is anyone, again, I see the chat boxes going. If there's anything, just turn your mic on and let me know because I can't see you. Please don't be overwhelmed. I don't know if anyone has experience working in the kind of the education system in the States. Maybe you studied education, maybe you've been a teacher before, but standards are a really big kind of complicated thing to look at. Us going through and looking at some of these now, this is just extra information to help shape your understanding of students' ability and what they may be expected to do by the time they graduate elementary or junior high school. When you're actually in the classroom working with students, it's the LET's role to make sure that these standards are met. And the textbooks themselves are designed to follow these standards. So the really important part here, if you follow the textbook, if you're in a textbook English class, if you follow the textbook, you will be following these standards. So if anything, sharing these standards now, this is just to provide you with some additional guidance for developing activities or games for different grade levels. So again, this is just kind of some extra information, some more context for the actual English skills students will be expected to do at certain grade level, at certain benchmarks in their English learning. Okay, but again, knowing the disclaimer that this is not something that's necessarily expected for you to know, it's just to give you a little bit more insight and a little additional resource. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this with an activity, a matching activity. I'm going to send you a link in the chat. 1 second. It should be this link right here. Let me see if this works. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Is this the correct link? This is the correct link. How do I get to the chat? Oh, here it is. There we go. Okay, great. So I sent, oh no, I accidentally sent it as a direct message to Deborah. I'm so sorry, everyone. One more time. There you go. Okay, everyone should have this link now. Go ahead and open it up. This is the activity we're going to be doing. Please, when you open up the link, click save a copy to my drive so that you can edit the document. You should only have viewing access right now. That's because I want you to work on this on your own. So please click on the link and save a copy to your drive and just look at page 1 for now. And what we're going to do, so I'm going to escape here. Escape. Okay, I'm going to switch over so you can see what we're looking at. So can you see this? Yes, you can now see my screen here. I see a lot of people joining it. So on here, this is going to be the first activity that we're going to do. So in order to help you better understand Taiwan's English curriculum and also manage your own expectations for your students and the activities you can do with them, we're going to take a look at different language objectives for different grade levels. So again, once you have this document, I want you to save a copy to your drive so that you can edit it, okay? And just kind of as a disclaimer, in different counties and different districts, or even in different classes in your school, you're going to find different English abilities. And what we're doing with this activity is we're going to look at some of the national guidelines, but know that within your class, you will have students who will fall under, at, or above these standards. So the first activity we're going to do is we're going to do this activity. You see grades 1 to 9 here. And then you see some language content over here. These are sentences. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the timer. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you on your own version of the document to go ahead and match what you think here, which one of these matches with which grade level, keeping in mind that first grade to 9th grade will get progressively more difficult. So I'm going to put 5 minutes on. Again, I haven't given you any other additional context. We haven't looked at the standards yet. So just from your impression, just kind of easiest to hardest, go ahead and try and sort these now. And don't move on to the next session yet. So I'm going to put a 5-minute timer on. I'm going to press play. And I'll let you work on this. So I'm going to have a look at the chat. If you have any questions while this is going on, please let me know. And when we come back, not able to get it. Do you mean the documents?
Yes, I see it. I'm just not being able to get it to go into my drive or make any kind of edits to it.
So you should be able to save a copy as. So if you go up to file, it should have save a copy in my drive, save to my drive, or download. You could just download it as like a PDF or a Word document and open it up on your computer.
Okay, I think I'll try that.
If not, you can also just maybe take a screenshot of this right now, and then you can just write down on like a sticky note kind of which letters would go there. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's about 3 more minutes. Again, this is, I know I haven't given you a lot of context yet, so this is just to get kind of see what you would do with this, kind of looking at these different language objectives and kind of what grades you think they would fit into. About another minute and a half left. Again, this is just kind of an exercise to get you thinking about the actual English language that will be used by students in the classroom, what kind of actual language objectives you might encounter at different grades in Taiwan. So about one more minute and then I'll ask everyone, we'll go through the answers together, then we'll take a look at the standards, and finally we'll do some discussion to wrap it up. Okay, 10 more seconds. Go ahead and finish up, and hopefully you have all of these done. So I did figure out how to look at the chat box as I'm speaking and presenting my screen. I should be better at technology by now, but I'm not used to Zoom. I'm better at Google Meets. So what I want to do, because I can see the chat box, is I want to actually ask all of you. We'll go through and I'll ask you for your answers. So I want to go ahead and start with grade 1, first grade. Which of these language content objectives did you put in first grade? See them coming in? Very good. D. So this one, this is kind of elementary phonics. Lots of those kind of phonics that go on in a first grade classroom. And second grade is something very similar to that. What's following up? What's a little bit higher than that? Wonderful. Oh, it makes me so happy to hear that. Okay, second grade, we'll get some phonics, but we'll also get some maybe simple vocabulary that's going to be matching with those phonics. So something like beep, 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 ball. It's a ball. Very good. What about third grade? So what kind of would come right after that? Ooh, very good. So yeah, I see some question marks, but in general, we have, I see the answer coming up. Third grade would be this. And again, these are kind of, like I said, every school will look a little bit different, but again, this activity is focusing more on kind of developing and getting more difficult as it goes on. So for third grade here, we have what's this? It's a ball. This kind of simple sentence pattern that third grade usually works with. They also tend to touch on what's that? It's a blank. So those are some of the common sentence patterns you'll work on with third grade, some simple objects as well. Now, what about fourth grade? Any ideas? Great. I'm seeing B and C come up a lot. The correct answer is actually B. Very good. These two very close. So in fourth grade, that's when they tend to work on prepositions. So in, on, and under, sometimes next to. That's something that's commonly seen in a fourth grade textbook. So the ball is on the table. And shortly, kind of right after that, fifth grade, what kind of answers do we have? Ooh, very good. C popping up here. I like PE class. I like basketball. So we're getting a little bit more advanced vocabulary here, kind of putting some sentences together. Fifth grade, they tend to start talking about class schedule. So talking about different things they're doing in class, PE class, math class, science class, and so on. What about sixth grade? Any ideas for sixth grade? Ooh, very good. E. Yeah, so we have some ing verbs that come up, also some places. You're doing what at what place. This kind of is, again, building onto that difficulty. Sixth graders might be talking about different actions or things you do at certain places. Seventh grade, their curriculum. Let's see, what guesses do we have first? Oh, very good, very good. So 7th grade is A. The correct answer here is A. I'm playing basketball with my classmate at school. So adding in some additional people here. Also, one thing to know about 7th grade is 7th grade tends to spend a lot of their first semester reviewing everything from elementary school. So when students get to 7th grade, which is the beginning of junior high school, they actually spend an entire semester reviewing everything else before that. What about 8th grade? What do we have here? Gee, very good. So we are starting to get some kind of past tense. Past tense is sometimes introduced in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, but we're getting past tense in more complex sentences by 8th grade. Last weekend, I went to the park to play basketball with my friend. And lastly, 9th grade, the last one we have here is I. It's important to drink a lot of water when playing basketball. If not, you might feel dehydrated. Dehydrated might be a little bit of a stretch. I'm not sure if they know that word, but the idea is that they're able to kind of form more complex sentences with more complex vocabulary by 9th grade. So thank you everyone for participating in this activity. This is, again, I said there's some kind of a little bit of variety within each school, but this kind of shows the order of development of language. So how things get progressively more advanced as students go through 1st to 9th grade. So elementary 1st to 6th and junior high 7th, 8th, and 9th in Taiwan. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to this second section, and this is a lot of writing. I hope please don't be overwhelmed. This is more, again, that reference, that guidance, just a resource for you. So this is, again, just a resource. So in Taiwan, they follow the National Curriculum Guidelines for English, and these guidelines were last updated in 2018. And these guidelines contain 2 key parts. They have the core competencies and they have the essential learning focuses. So the core competencies are kind of these like fundamental beliefs that should be in all of the classes. And those are things like physical and mental wellness, logical thinking and problem solving, moral praxis and citizenship. These are kind of bigger core ideas that hopefully can kind of be echoed in all of the English classes students are in. But then the second part of the standards are the essential learning focuses. And these are the actual like framework that help teachers develop materials, help with textbook development, and also kind of within teaching activities in the actual classroom. Now, these guidelines are broken down into 5 stages to address grades 1 to 12. Stage 1 is for grades 1 and 2. Stage 2 is for grades 3 and 4. Stage 3 is for 5 and 6. Stage 4 is for 7, 8, and 9, all in junior high. And stage 5 is 10, 11, and 12, senior high in Taiwan. So within the essential learning focuses, there's 2 further parts. We have student performance, what students can do or show. So performance in listening, speaking, reading, writing, language proficiency, interest and attitude, approaches and strategies, cultural literacy, logical thinking, and so on. That's, again, it's a lot of information, which is why I'm breaking it down into the simplest cheat sheet that I can for you, because if you check out this full document, it's, I believe, like many pages. It's right over here. It is about 48 pages of a lot of text. So I don't want you to have to go through all of that. So this kind of this summary will hopefully kind of consolidate it for you if this is something you're interested in using as a resource. The other part of the students' essential learning focuses are their learning content. This is highlighting what linguistic knowledge, communication skills, and understanding of culture and customs and cognitive capability they should have. The last one is only relevant in high school, so we'll not look at it for now. So I made a cheat sheet of this for you to have a look at. This cheat sheet focuses on some of the key learning content for each grade. So this is our cheat sheet. We have our stages, our grades, and some of the key objectives or key points. Now you'll notice when it comes to content, it starts from stage 2. Now the reason for this, again, is that the national curriculum states that English should be learned from the 3rd grade. Now, some counties teach English from 1st and 2nd grade, or have bilingual programs that start from the 1st and 2nd grade, which is why you'll notice here that even though there's nothing here, your school might still have a program starting from 1st and 2nd grade, and that's okay. But officially, it starts from the 3rd and 4th grade, and that's why our stage 2 has these kind of objectives starting from here. So you'll see just I highlighted some key things again as a reference for you. Starting from grades 3 and 4, students should be able to identify capital and lowercase letters. They should be able to know the difference between consonants and vowels and the sounds of letters. Phonics of the letters, so a, b, 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 the different phonics. Reading the letters aloud and spelling out words. Simple classroom instructions, everyday expressions. They say vocabulary of stage level 2, but they don't have a list of what that vocabulary is. Ways of greeting in Taiwan and abroad, and major festivals and traditions and customs. I mentioned before, most units have like an expansion for culture or something like that. So they do actually make it one of their main objectives to teach students about major festivals, traditions, and customs, both in Taiwan and globally. So the textbooks you'll notice might have a unit on Christmas. They might also have a unit on Dragon Boat Festival. So there's a lot of different stuff like that you'll also see in the textbooks. By 5th and 6th grade, higher elementary, they're getting all of these goals plus signs in simple English. They should be able to recognize the 300 words, 300 word list, which I have the link here. You can check it out. I'll also show it to you. These are the most commonly used 300 word list. And students graduating 6th grade, the end of elementary school, should know all of these 300 words. So if you're a teacher in junior high school and you're curious, what are my 7th graders going to know? What's their English level going to be like? This could be a reference for you to see which words have students learned before. Again, thinking about how you can use these things as a reference and not be overwhelmed by them. So again, this is something that 6th graders should know by the end of 6th grade. They should know simple punctuation, some common sentence structures. They are becoming familiar with simple songs, rhymes, short passages, stories, and plays, children's books, a simple introduction of oneself, family, and friends, logically sequencing the events of a story, making simple guesses based on integrated information, and so on. So seeing how these skills adapt and grow into higher elementary. And then the last one I included here was for junior high. And this is where we're getting students able to understand higher sentence patterns, grammar patterns, looking at maybe tables or graphs, reading simple articles, looking at stories and identifying setting, characters, conflicts, resolutions, looking at a narrative's perspective and attitude and purpose of writing, main ideas, expressing yourself, again, that expressive language, describing who, what, when, where, how, and why, undertaking role play, guided discussion, knowledge of various cultures, and so on, classifying information, cause and effect, objective versus subjective opinions, and so on. So this is a cheat sheet for you. You're welcome to look at it more. You're also welcome to reference the national guidelines if you're really curious. If you have a background in education, I encourage you, if you have an interest, you don't have to. But I have a few quick notes for you. And I want to kind of emphasize this again. There is no expectation for you to know, understand, or reference these standards in your role as an ETA. In previous years, ETAs have expressed a kind of an interest in knowing more about the curriculum, the English, the standards that exist in Taiwan, which is why we wanted to share this with you today. But there's no expectation for that of you. Going back to your role as being there to support the LET. So yeah, just kind of knowing that this is an additional resource, but there's no expectation. Also, I do want to emphasize that it is possible to lead students in lower stages to do activities that can call on skills from higher stages. This is a guideline. It's not kind of an exact set in stone thing that has to be followed to a T. For example, last year I did an observation at a 2nd grade classroom in a rural area, and the ETA and the LET had students in 2nd grade read a story, a very simple story with lots of pictures, but then they practiced identifying who, what, when, where, why. based on the story that they read. That's a skill that is technically not necessary until junior high school, but they did it successfully in second grade. So don't take this as a kind of black and white, one side or the other kind of thing. Take it as kind of a guideline for you to know kind of going in when you get started. And knowing that if you do want to try some higher level skills in lower stages, you definitely want to incorporate scaffolding, routine, and LET support. Things we'll talk about more later this month. Again, this information is here to provide you with a reference if you want one for language objectives for students. It's not something that's usually shared too much with foreign teachers, so I just wanted to provide it with you. Also, this information can help you in the beginning of the year as you plan your initial activities, guiding you in activity design. So for example, what I mentioned before, if you're going to be in a junior high school, you could use that 300-word list and kind of the goals and objectives that are under the 5th and 6th grade column to kind of give you some ideas about where you might start. What might your students' levels be when you start at school? And lastly, these last 2 points here, if you're teaching CLIL or a bilingual program, you won't necessarily follow these standards because these are the standards for English classes. But they can be a reference for you to understand what students might be learning kind of like parallel to what they're learning in CLIL class in their English course. So if you're teaching 7th grade CLIL, you might be able to reference this and be like, okay, we don't have any standards for our 7th grade CLIL class, but I know what the standards are for 7th grade English class, and I can kind of make that parallel to some of the ideas I use for my class in my CLIL class, and so on. The same thing goes for maybe a 3rd grade CLIL class or bilingual class or so on. And lastly, another great resource is your LET and the textbook if you're in an English class. I already mentioned it before, but the textbook is designed to follow these standards. So you don't necessarily have to reference these standards in particular. You can just reference the textbook and their information delivery. But if you're curious about kind of the background behind it or what skills are coming up or what are the expectations for students on more of a national level, this is something you could reference if you have an interest in it. Okay, so that was a lot of information. And what I want to do now is I want to actually have time to discuss this. So I have 4 discussion questions for you. The first discussion question is about the matching activity on page 1. How many did you get correct? The second activity is about this kind of overall activity, matching and the review of the curriculum design, what I just explained above here. Did these activities change your understandings of students' abilities in Taiwan in any way, and how so? And then question 3, as an ETA, how might an understanding of standards and students' learning goals help us when we plan for classroom activities? And lastly, how are you feeling after this activity, but also after all of this information that we've just shared? Like kind of the end, kind of wrapping up this workshop with this activity and then some Q&A, how are you feeling? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to ask Kevi or Fonda or whoever's running the Zoom to put people into breakout rooms, and Elta, you'll be put into a breakout room as well to ask some questions and do some of this discussion as well. So go ahead, and if you have any questions, feel free to pop back into the main room and we'll be here. So Kevi or Fonda? Great, thank you. Ray, 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 你在听吗？没有在听。How do you think that went, Deborah? while we're waiting for discussions to come back?
That was really good.
Okay.
Honestly, it was really good. Yeah. For how much information you're able to include and keep it very directed and concise, I think it went really well.
Okay, hopefully. We'll see how the discussion goes when it comes back.
Yeah, don't worry. I think it was really fantastic.
I'm glad to hear. Okay, so we have 15 minutes.
Okay. We shall wait.
I see that people are slowly coming back to the main group, which tells me that the 15 minutes is probably finishing up. We'll go ahead and wait until everyone's back. So if you're back early, you're welcome to just kind of hang out. If you have any questions, kind of right off the bat, we'll do some discussion sharing. But if you have any additional questions, you're welcome to type them in the chat or turn on your microphone if you have any questions in the meantime. Okay, so it looks like 82 people are back. I think most people are back to the main group. We had just over 80 before we went off into breakout rooms. So I was going to have my screen shared and look at the PowerPoint, which has these questions. But when I have my screen shared, I can't see all of you. So what I want to do instead is I just put the questions in the chat box. And I want to go around and I want to kind of ask anyone who's willing to share. We'll go through some of these questions. I'd like to hear a little bit about what you discussed. No pressure. I won't call on you randomly. I will ask for volunteers. But I'd love to hear about how your discussion went. So maybe starting with the first question, did this activity, so kind of everything that we just kind of did in this second hour, did it change your understanding of students' abilities in Taiwan in any way? And if you, I'd love to see if anyone would be willing to share on that, or if you don't have something to share on that, you could also choose the second question about how might having this understanding help you in the classroom. So is there anyone who would be willing to share what your group talked about? You can go ahead and turn on your mic. I'd love to hear from at least one person.
I can if you want me to. So my group, most of us, we've either taught before or we have student taught before in the US. So we were kind of talking about exactly how we're gonna kind of tailor our approach, like change what we already know to fit what we're going to be doing here, because all of us are very used to following standards. We do it all the time in the US. But it's just kind of seeing, okay, what level are they going to be at? And then even within what levels we know they're at, where are they functionally? Like, where's my class? So just kind of seeing for the first, couple of days, where are we, and like utilizing the LETs and everything, because they're the ones who have like the best understanding of where the kids or the young adults, depending on who we're teaching, actually are at this point in time.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like your group definitely had a really good discussion about that. I think that's definitely something that when you come into Taiwan, into this role with a background in education, it's on one hand, like a really good asset for you, because you have this understanding, this familiarity with standards and students' abilities and working to reach certain goals. But on the other hand, it's completely different context. And so there's definitely an adjustment period, getting to know the students and just starting off that first week, just observing and seeing what things are like, exploring the textbook, talking with your LET, seeing how they present information. and how they assess students to make sure they're reaching those standards. It's definitely an adjustment period. But great, thanks for sharing. Does anyone else want to share on this point, something you talked about, on maybe how this might have changed your understanding, or how this might help you in the future for classrooms? I know it's a really big group to be sharing in front of, but anyone else?
Okay, I can share. We kind of talked a lot about the same things, and just how, like, even though sometimes standards can be kind of annoying to have to follow, it is something to just like keep in the back of your mind every time you plan a lesson. And I kind of share with my group, like I a lot of times like lesson planning would kind of think of an activity in my mind, but then realize that there weren't actually any standards that aligned with it, which is really annoying, but that is like something to think about that you have to have. Okay, that kind of goes with the second point, sorry. But you like the standards are kind of that starting point of what you have to look at while you're planning, and just keep going back to them when you're in doubt.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing, both Presley and Emma. Thank you for sharing. I definitely think that it's especially for anyone else who's in this call right now who's not as familiar with standards, or who doesn't have a background in looking at standards or using standards in the classroom. These standards, again, to kind of reemphasize what I said before, are tied into the textbook. So if you're thinking about an activity in class and you're looking at these standards to help kind of see if your activity is fitting them, if you're not familiar with standards, you can do the same thing with the textbook. Look at this unit's goals and objectives. What are the target sentence patterns? What is the target vocabulary? What are they expected to be able to do? Do they need to be able to say these words? Do they need to be able to spell these words? Do they need to be able to use them in the sentence? What are the specific goals and objectives that you're working with? And how can you create activities that help to meet these? So yeah, thank you for that part of the discussion. What about the second two questions, the last questions? How are you feeling after today's workshop? And is there something you learned or something you still have a question about? You're welcome to turn on your mic and share, or you're welcome to just type it in the chat box as well. And that could be from Deborah's sharing or from my sharing. And it could be about kind of anything that we talked about today. Yeah, Liam?
Okay. I have a question about the CLIL a little bit. So I don't remember exactly where it was, but someone mentioned that there's a difference between soft CLIL and hard CLIL, and they like explained the difference, but honestly, I was a little unclear on what it is. So that's like kind of a question that I was wondering if you could answer.
Yeah, so CLIL is kind of it's kind of like a spectrum, right? And hard CLIL, the more hard CLIL you're going, is the more content is going to be your focus. Soft CLIL is the more kind of language is going to be your focus, thinking about it in that sense. So hard CLIL is going to be really using English to teach some really difficult content goals. So using English to teach students like photosynthesis or some other kind of like content knowledge that you want students to take away at the end of class. Soft CLIL is more kind of using language, teaching English, how plants grow. What do plants need? They need water, focusing more on the language, simple elements with maybe some content there as well that they're learning along the way, but they're also learning that language element. So it's all kind of like a spectrum of content and language. And I do think we will have a workshop later this semester that's like a full 2 hours dedicated to CLIL and helping you come up with activities that kind of work with a CLIL context, how to work maybe without a textbook, because a lot of CLIL classes might not have textbooks, or they might only have textbooks in Chinese, like a music textbook in Chinese, which might be kind of a challenge too. So there should be more information about that coming up later as well. I hope that answers the question though.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, for those of you who shared, and thank you for typing in the chat box as well. Both Deborah and I really hope that this was a good introduction to TESOL. Again, we went into this workshop kind of with a disclaimer that this is a lot of information. This starts really big with this idea of TESOL, then policy for English education in Taiwan, then what an actual English classroom does, then kind of down into the actual language you'll be using and teaching and working with in the classroom. So we started really big, then we got really specific kind of towards the end, but regardless, it's still a lot of information. So I think this is just about time. It's 3:45, so we'll let you go. You're free to go. If you do have any other questions you want to ask Will, I think we'll stay around for maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. You can stay in the chat and ask. If not, it was nice to see you all today. I hope that you're here in Taiwan soon or in quarantine, out of quarantine. Welcome is the main point.
Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you.